Made in the USA. It's hot again. The number of jobs that are coming back to the U.S. or starting here for the first time are at record highs. 60,000 manufacturing jobs were added to the U.S. in 2014 compared to 12,000 about 11 years ago. Harry Moser, Reshoring Initiative president, joins us now to tell us more about the trend in the increase in manufacturing jobs in the U.S. Harry, welcome back to Arise Xchange. Good to talk to you again.
Great to be here.
What is driving the return of jobs back to the U.S.? Just last week, GM announced that it will invest nearly $5.5 billion in plants right here in the U.S.
The auto industry is certainly important because both GM is investing, Ford is investing, I suspect Chrysler is too, but also the German and the Japanese and the Korean companies are investing, foreign direct investments, so investments here by foreign companies. So the automotive industry leads both the reshoring list and the foreign direct investment list by a big margin.
When NAFTA was passed, everyone said all the jobs would go to Mexico and elsewhere, and the trend was in that direction for a while. Is this now an example that NAFTA is actually working?
I'd say no, because there's roughly as much investment going into Mexico as there is going into the United States. In a much smaller country, because Mexico still has the labor cost advantage and it has better trade connections to a lot of countries and can export without tariffs, whereas we'd have to pay tariffs to get our cars in. So I do not think it's proof of the effectiveness of NAFTA.
Okay, so what is driving this back to the U.S., and are there specific areas of the country that are benefiting more than others?
Yeah, certainly the largest sort of macro factor is that the wages in China have been going up at about 15% per year expressed in dollars for the last 15 years. So the cost gap, the labor cost gap between the U.S. and China has closed dramatically to the point where the companies now can say, now it makes sense to calculate the duty and the freight and the carrying cost of inventory and the intellectual property risk, all these other factors, and now that labor cost gap is small enough that those other factors in many cases add up to a bigger number, and therefore it makes sense to come back.
And also, is there anything to be said that these other countries where these jobs went, they have increased their regulations, meaning the regulatory burden is getting heavier there. So if you're going to deal with regulations, you might as well deal with them here?
Our regulations instead of their regulations. Huh? So yes, it's true that theirs are growing, but they're coming up from a low base, and like I've heard that China has as tough regulations as we do, but they just don't enforce them. Mm-hmm. Whereas here we have tough regulations and we absolutely enforce them. So it's clear that the regulatory burden is smaller in most of those other countries, but growing.
We have a chart here of companies that are leaders in creating jobs here in the United States. Anything that sticks out about these jobs? Walmart adding over 2,500 jobs. GM, we just talked about 1,800 jobs. Apple returning more jobs back to the United States.
To me, Walmart sticks out because they've committed over a 10-year period ended with 2022 to bring back $250 billion with a B dollars worth of U.S. product. And that, from our calculation, that represents something like 300,000 manufacturing jobs.
In the U.S., there are a lot of plants and factories that were shut down over the last few decades. Are you seeing the infrastructure of these plants being rebuilt, or are there brand new projects?
Both are happening. I've read a series of articles saying that the vacancy rates in industrial properties are at the lowest level in the last 15 or 20 years. So, and as a result, additional properties are being produced. So people are fixing up the old ones and occupying them and building new properties.
Harry, of course, a lot of jobs left over the last few decades. So how do we make sure that trend doesn't reverse itself again and the jobs now go overseas?
I'd say the key, first key is skilled workforce. We have to train relatively more tool makers and precision machinists, even if we don't have quite as many TV and radio announcers.
That's good for me.
Because our skilled workforce doesn't have the quantity, the quality, the training that, say, the Germans have. Okay. And that's the key difference between the success of their economy and the relative failure of ours.
It's also the education system. We pushed people away from vocation schools.
Exactly. I call it professional school.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
much easier to attract them.
Harry Moser, Reshoring Initiative President. Thank you so much, as always.